Hi, I'm Emma Sutherland, clinical naturopath, author, mum, and your host. With over 20 years in clinical practice, I've helped thousands of women and their families transform their health using evidence based integrative strategies. Now, I am deeply passionate about making science simple and actionable so you feel confident and empowered in your health decisions. This channel is your go to for trusted insights, expert conversations, and practical tools that support your real life wellness. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Meredith Ruby, a seasoned chiropractor who brings nearly 2 decades of experience practicing both in the US and Sydney's inner west. Trained at Palmer College of Chiropractic in Florida, and with a background in sports medicine from East Carolina University, Meredith blends evidence-based techniques with a deeply holistic philosophy. She is passionate about centering your health beyond the spine and specialises in advanced approaches like cranial manipulative reflex technique, sacro-occipital technique, and cranial therapies that not only relieve pain but address the root cause of dysfunction. Today, we'll explore her unique healing methods, her patient-first philosophy, and why she believes our bodies always tell us everything we need to know. Welcome, Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I would love to start with what inspired your journey into chiropractic care.
So, growing up in a household with a mum who is a nurse, I was always into healthcare. Did not realize at the time it would be more of the natural side of healthcare versus modern medicine. But growing up playing sport, I combined the thought of sport and medicine and went to university for a sports medicine degree. And then after that, I decided that was actually not the path I wanted to take and not what I was meant to be doing for the rest of my life. And by chance, I went with my dad to his chiropractor and spoke to him for about an hour after one of his adjustments. And I walked out of the door and I said, that's it. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. So that's my little story.
You just knew.
I just
Absolutely
knew.
just knew. And you've studied it, you've studied overseas. Tell us a little bit about what you studied, how that went.
Yeah. So born and bred in the US, actually. So did my university at East Carolina University in North Carolina. And then I did my chiropractic schooling in Florida at Palmer College of Chiropractic, Florida. So I had a great education there, which I'm very thankful for. It's one of the top schools to go to in America. So yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Right. And how many years is chiropractic medicine?
Yeah, so it's quite different, I found out, to Australia in the way that it's structured. So in the US, you have to have a 4-year university degree, and it actually doesn't really matter what degree you have. It's obviously beneficial to have something more in health or sciences. And then you have 3 years of chiropractic. So it comes out to 7 years, and you come out with a doctorate of chiropractic.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a lot of study. I think a lot of people don't realize how intense and difficult it is to become a chiropractor. And I know you use a range of techniques within chiropractic medicine. There's a lot of different techniques available. When do you decide what method to use and how do these all work together to enhance those patient outcomes?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's over 100, even close to 200 now, techniques within chiropractic. Even though we're only 130 years young, there's a wide range of techniques from low force to high force to instruments to hands-on that you can use. And you can use a combination of things as well, which I tend to do. But you do find that certain patients respond to certain techniques better than others because we're all very different. We have different pain levels, we have different thresholds, we have nervous systems that fire properly, ones that are in fight or flight. So yeah, you have to take all that into consideration, which I've learned over the years, and I've combined what I find works well together. But on the day, it does come down to that patient on the day, if their nervous system can handle the input that we're going to exchange for them.
And I've read a lot about CMRT, cranial manipulative reflex technique, and that's definitely a specialty that's central to your practice. Can you explain what it is, how it works, and why you love it so much?
Yeah, sure. You did very well saying that because it is a mouthful. And I tend to shorten it to either organ work or organ therapy because it is just a lot of words there. But our founder, Major DeJarnette, discovered it in 1931. So it has been around for a while, but he actually called it bloodless surgery, which is a bit of a harsh term.
Wow.
But he basically couldn't come up with another term that denoted we are changing the organs from the outside in the way that they function, which I find is quite miraculous. And I don't know any other profession that can change the way that the organs function just naturally.
Yeah, tell me more about how it works, like on that kind of either cellular or organ level. How does it work and how do you explain it to the layperson?
And yeah, we'll just go very late because it does get quite technical into the neurology of how it works. But basically, what will happen is the vertebral body bone in your spine moves, which will change the flow of cerebrospinal fluid up into the brain, which
Hmm.
minimizes circulation. And then over time, your body will splint that area, creating a tightening spot. And then that reflex pattern has been set into play. So your brain realizes that pattern and creates a little fiber on the back of your skull. And then we have a pattern.
So those patterns can be laid down from childhood. Is that right? That we're just running these patterns on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely, they can. I check everyone's skull for a reflex pattern in their organs, no matter the age. But you do find that kids respond quicker to clearing of that reflex just because they don't have as many stresses in their life as an adult. But it does vary.
And are there any particular kind of physical complaints that you feel CMRT really shines for that work particularly well?
I do find phantom pain is quite a popular one. So patients often say to me or on the intake form, yeah, I've had my gallbladder removed. And I said, okay, great. You've had your gallbladder removed, but you actually don't remove the nerves that supply your gallbladder from your brain. So people can come in with still having gallbladder symptoms. And then we work on clearing those chronic pain patterns through the gallbladder reflex. So that's a really popular one. Another one is hiatus hernia. So people getting acid reflux, harsh voice, dry cough, sort of those symptoms that can come with a pseudohiatal hernia. But often it is an underlying reflex for the stomach. And if we do clearing of that reflex, we can bring back functionality of that organ. And of course, then minimizing or reducing those symptoms.
Yeah, amazing. Because they're quite stubborn things to be treated. And I bet people come in and say to you, oh, I've seen the GP, I've seen the specialist, I've seen this, I've seen that person, because they're things that can be very stubborn. So brilliant to hear that there is a therapy that can be helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do see a lot of people that say exactly that. I've seen everyone under the sun. No one can help me. I'm at a loss. What can you do? Things like that. So it's nice
Yeah.
that we'll be able to help them.
Yeah. And what's its point of difference to other techniques that you might use? Like, how would you think, or why would you think, oh, I need to use CMRT here? What's the kind of little white flag that you go, yes, this is what I need to use?
So it's probably just the chronic pain pattern. So for example, go back to gallbladder again, shoulder blade pain, really common. People think it's a shoulder. It's not actually their shoulder that is causing that. It's just that stubborn reflex arc pain going from the vertebra to the brain to the organ. And so we just need to really clear those there. That I find most people have an underlying organ reflex, whether they're aware of it or not. And I think a differentiating point there too is that using the CMRT, I can actually find issues before they become symptomatic. So we shouldn't feel our organs, right? They shouldn't give us any signals. And often when they do, sometimes it can be already into the state of disease. But I've had a very interesting case, I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago. I kept determining a reflex for her ileocecal valve, so between the large and small intestine. And I said to her, this keeps coming up and it's not clearing. Do you mind if you go to your GP and see if we can investigate further? Even though she was asymptomatic and she was very good and the GP was very good, and they went and had a scan for her and they actually found a tumour on her intestine, which is quite dramatic, I know, but that's what was creating that reflex pattern.
Unbelievable. I'm thinking immediately of patients that have a condition called SIBO, or small intestinal bowel overgrowth, where they have a sort of dysfunction or a dysbiosis in the small intestine. And often there's also a motility issue. So the gut isn't flushing and emptying the way it's supposed to. And often the ileocecal valve is not functioning as it should to close off the small to the large intestines. That's a really fascinating insight there around CMRT and being able to feel that dysfunction. So when somebody comes in to see you, can you walk us through the process? Like, what occurs during treatment? What does a patient experience? Tell us what that's like.
Yeah, sure. During the adjustment, we obviously can perform different techniques, but the CMRT portion itself, I brought my little skull with me.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. No, this is great.
Very helpful to explain a little bit of what might occur. So when a patient is face down and I start to do the organ work and check for the indicators, we check about the base of the skull and that occiput there. I always say, imagine if there was an imaginary grid there, 3 areas and 7 rows across. So that's a lot of little different areas, but each one of those areas represents a different organ system and a different level in your spine. So when I find that fiber that your brain has created, because it's telling me, that's why it's there. It's there to tell me what's going on. So when I find that area of imbalance, we create a stimulus on the occiput while we are triggering the vertebral level of effect.
Okay.
So it's not a very complex thing as in what they feel, but the effects of removing that stimulus and the cause of that stimulus are massive. So a patient might not feel a huge change on the day besides a little sensory change in the fiber. It's often the day after or on the follow-up visit that someone says to me, I no longer have that heartburn. I no longer feel that bloating that I was having, things like that. So it's usually an effect.
And I think it's really important because a lot of people may think when they go and see a chiro that unless they get the big crack happening, that the treatment isn't working or effective. So I really love to completely dispel that myth about the way that you're working with this therapy.
Absolutely. That is definitely, probably hear it once a day actually, that patients think to me, oh, you just adjust bones or you crack bones. And look, that is a style, that is a technique, and that is one way that we get to the nervous system, because all those pathways sit in the joint spaces, but it's not actually a way that we have to use. But when some people hear that, they enjoy that feeling, they enjoy that experience, it actually sends a signal to the brain and releases dopamine. So it's actually a nice feeling, that feel-good hormone. But there are plenty of other ways, gentle wiggling, jiggling, all sorts of ways to get there that don't make that big noise for some people.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And especially working with children, it's just such an accessible treatment style that you have. It's really great. What kind of demographic do you tend to work with or like to work with?
I tend to see middle-aged professionals in the clinic, but then of course what comes with that is families, because they have young families. So once we start working with them, they start to bring in their whole family, and it becomes just a lovely family visits on the weekend or during the week when school holidays are on, things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. And you really emphasize that health is multifaceted and very individualized, which I love. As a naturopath, we have that deep philosophy too. For you, how does lifestyle, nutrition, emotional health, or even mental stress factor into your treatment plans along with the manual therapy that you're doing?
Yeah, so absolutely. Multifaceted. It's not always one thing that works for everyone for everything. I always say everyone should get their nervous system adjusted. Let's start there. Let's see what the body can heal on its own. And then, of course, we have in a society that we've created all these different stresses. They need to be balanced in other ways. So whether it's supplements, nutrition, quality sleep, more exercise, they're all very important to work together and finding that right balance.
Yeah, it is very multifaceted. The more I read about sleep and the more I research about sleep, the more I realize that's such a foundational part of health. So I love that, you mentioned sleep in there. I think it's very underrated.
It absolutely is. And as a chiropractor, we often, people say, oh, I always sleep better after an adjustment. I'm like, great, you should, because your body's in balance and your body's able to flush out the toxins in the brain at the end of the day if you have good quality sleep. There's lots of benefits to having that.
Excellent. And I know you aim to live healthy to 100. I love that you put a number on it. That's so great. But 100, practicing walking, yoga, mindful kind of living. How does that personal commitment influence how you relate to your patients and also care for your patients?
Yeah, it's important to have goals for yourself, for your health and your life, of course. And not everyone's going to have that same goal and that aspiration. But I know what it will take to get myself there. And I have to actually respect a patient's goal as well, whether it's a short-term goal, running a marathon, or just living older than their parents did, whatever it might be for them. I think it's just a nice mutual respect. And a lot of patients always ask me, oh, do you get adjusted? Or how do you look after yourself? So I think you also have to be a bit of a reflection of what you are living and breathing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but that authenticity really shines through with you. And I'm sure your patients feel it as well.
I hope so.
Now, are there any other myths on chiropractic care that you want to bust, or any kind of last minute thoughts for us?
Yeah, sure. I think that a lot of people say to me, if I go to a chiropractor, I always have to go to a chiropractor. Do you hear that one? Yeah. So that to me is a complete myth. You don't always have to go. You don't always have to get adjusted. But my return to that is always you'll want to feel better. So you continue to get adjusted.
Yeah. Yes,
You don't always have to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And then if people want to reach out and find you, Meredith, where can they find you? Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so obviously to our website is best, elementalchiropractic.com.au. If you want to book in, have an appointment, you can ring the clinic, 8065 5896, and on all the socials.
Awesome. We'll make sure we put all the links in the show notes below. But thank you so much for joining us today, Meredith. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you to you and your listeners.
Thank you so much for being with me today. Don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button below. Check out the links in the show notes for more health empowering information.